Welcome back. Often when you think about what will happen if I get COVID-19, it's fear, it's panic, and rightly so. No one wants to get sick, especially in a disease which seems to be so unpredictable. Now, we all know the figures. The mortality rates are relatively low. You'll see a lot of people talking about how there are several other diseases which kill more people who get them. But who wants to be one of those people who has contracted COVID-19 and risk it, right? So let's get a first-hand account from someone who tested positive for COVID-19, has now come back home and is under quarantine. I'm joined by Ajit Mishra, Director of Institute of Economic Growth. Ajit, thank you for speaking with us today. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you for this chance to share
All right, let me begin. I just want to start by Yes. Let me begin with the question, and let me start by asking you how you knew you had to be tested, what were your symptoms, and then what happened next?
Well, it's a couple of things. I came on the 15th of night from UK. So that's one factor which was always playing at the back of my mind. Then I had a fairly sudden rise in temperature on the 15th night. So I put these two things together and realized that there is a possibility, and even if it's a small possibility, given that I'm a director of the institute, I'm going to have so many meetings, meet so many people, and I also live with old parents. So I decided the safest thing for me will be to go and get a test done.
Was it easy to get a test? And did you have any symptoms at that point?
No, when I went for the test, I didn't have any symptoms. But still, as a precaution, we just had to call them and they sent me an ambulance. So going part was easy, but the test center was incredibly crowded, I must say. 80 to 100 people waiting there in a small corridor. And not everybody was getting tested also. Because that time I think the protocol was that unless you have come in contact with a confirmed positive or you have traveled abroad, you won't be tested. But luckily I've belonged to the second category, so I was tested. And after the testing, they immediately put me in the hospital. They admitted me in Ramanaloya Hospital.
Mr. Mishra, now we've seen so many anecdotes and stories about people who went through COVID-19, and I'm glad that you're fine now back home. Many people describe it as the worst flu they've ever had. What was your experience?
I mean, I must say, as you know, the doctors say that 80% of the COVID-19 positive patients will have very mild symptoms. So I'm lucky to be one of those, one with mild symptoms. Now, my experience would say that it's not the physical illness which is the critical factor, but it's the mental side of it. We have made so much of collected so much of information about how horrible it can be. That it always plays on your mind. Otherwise, you are absolutely right. It's just a bad flu. It's probably lasts a bit longer than the ordinary flu, but in terms of discomfort, in terms of illness or other physical symptoms, it's no worse than a common flu.
And now that you've been in that system, what have been your observations today? Several weeks after you first went through this, and the world was different around 15th, 16th of March, as far as COVID is concerned. Right now, it is a different level of awareness. Were there enough protection for the doctors? Was there enough awareness of what to do? The social distancing? Were people careful?
Well, I can only talk about Safdarjung Hospital, which is where I was transferred after I tested positive. In terms of equipment, yes, they were all equipped. They were always in their proper gear, and the doctors were excellent. The ones who would visit regularly, the nursing, the other care, the cleanliness, the sanitary aspect, they were all fine. But this is specific to Safdarjung, so I cannot generalize. And even during the discharge, they were extremely careful. I noticed that Safdarjung uses a separate elevator for discharge patients, so as to avoid any contamination with the other two elevators. So that they are that careful.
Okay. What have been your observations now that you have gone through this? Right now, many people are thinking about two major questions. One is, are we testing enough? Do we need to test more? And second, if our overall health and medical system has the capacity to deal with the high numbers that are rapidly emerging. What are your observations on these questions?
Well, I feel that we are not testing enough. I see the newspaper reports today and yesterday that there are plans to test, in huge numbers. There are, plans to up the testing rate. But if I look at what was happening around 15, 16, or even few days back when I was released, testing wasn't enough. Now, the reason we need to test more, it's not just because South Korea and Germany did, but you see, what we're trying to do is because we're not able to test and do targeted isolation, we're doing a blanket isolation, which is essentially what we mean by lockdown. Now, this cannot be a solution forever. That is, the virus is going to stay with us for quite some time, unless we prove lucky or unless there is some miracle. So to achieve, targeted isolation and partial lockdowns, we do need to test more, and it should be easily accessible, and it should be, cheaper also.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing, Ajit Mishra, your experience. That's the voice of a COVID survivor. And you were lucky. Thankfully, you're back home and will stay healthy and safe. And it had mild symptoms. There are many who don't. There are many who do as well. The idea of this was to tell our viewers not to panic, not to panic. If this unfortunately happens to someone you know or to you, there is a way out. On that note, I want to thank you for watching the India Development Debate. We'll be back with more right after this break.